to do something that you weren't comfortable actually doing performance-wise, like that if you sing, for example, if did you feel like singing this morning, or did you just feel like doing just keeping the recitation stuff? I have no idea if you want to keep your voice intact for anything you might be working on right now, so we don't want to like overwork you, obviously, but
I do have a gig this evening, so if you're gonna get me to do something, don't wear out my voice.
that sounds good. Okay.
I have a reading challenge here that I think is interesting. I would need 2 other people, and it's kind of long.
Yeah, then do it. Yeah.
Okay. Do I have 2 volunteers?
I would love to. Yeah.
Okay.
Or Dale, do you want? I just did a ton of talking. Dale, if you want to go, do that.
I mean, if he needs 2 other people, and
Yeah,
you're not,
Well, you and Matthews can do it.
I'll take the particularly long one.
I'm gonna go get some water.
And then there are 2 other rules. One is labeled 9 and one is labeled 10. Beach, you might recognize this.
do you want to be 9 or 10?
I'll be 10.
Okay, I'll be 9.
Oh yes.
This
This
will probably take us to the change.
Yeah.
So
15K shift total.
Hooray! Keep it rolling.
all right.
Rather than dance, we're gonna do this.
Okay.
Wait, we just decided what we're doing. What are you doing? You're doing
10.
You're doing 10. All right,
Okay.
I'll do 9.
Okay, I believe. Do we want to give a sense of who 9 and who 10 is? Well, I think you can probably tell from what they're saying. Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine.
I'm playing a character named Juice.
I just recognize this.
Yeah.
So, okay, the thing about this game is that you don't really watch it, okay? Because usually there's not any action in the traditional sense. It's like watching a galaxy form in some far-off nebula. There are a million things to study, but things evolve far too slowly to count as action on this scale of time. You could watch it for a straight week and realize that the whole time nothing resembling football actually happened. But you don't feel cheated. And why would you? How could you see this and feel cheated?
Oh, look at you. You're using apostrophes. You're punctuating.
Well, this is special to me. I feel like I'm one of the only true appreciators of this game, and the duty of introducing someone to it is one I take very seriously. If I could put a tux on, I would. There are a lot of different ways to behold this game. I like to think of it as a rainbow of failed ideas. Some of these terrible ideas collapsed on themselves and disappeared. Some of these terrible ideas interacted with each other in any number of different ways, and some of these terrible ideas swallowed other, less terrible ideas whole. We don't have the details of how exactly all of this came to be. There are some things we know, and there are a lot of very safe guesses and projections. One thing we do know is that this was once an NFL game between the Denver Broncos and the Pittsburgh Steelers. It almost certainly started in the 21st century, probably the 2080s or 2090s. Over the next 15,000 years, the two-team system faded away. Outside teams, people, and interests began to interfere in the game, eventually claiming territory. Any questions so far?
Can we change the channel yet?
No. The game is divided into 58 territories. The Broncos and Steelers each still have their own territory. Territory 1 is claimed by the Broncos, who have refused to participate in any of this evolution. Their territory remains completely unaltered. The hash marks are freshly painted. The players still show up every Sunday in helmets and pads. They insist, without any success, that the game return to how it used to be. A wall stands between their territory and the others, although no one remembers for sure who built it. The Steelers exist, but barely. Their territory, which once covered half the field, is now reduced to a single tiny corner. They would have disappeared from the field entirely were it not for the Broncos, who leveraged whatever political power they had to ensure their opponent was still in the game. There's one Steelers player who still comes back every 500 years or so. They call him the Last Steeler. He just kind of drags a stool out there and sits there for an afternoon, then leaves. Nothing else much for him to do up there in the corner, really. Thanks to all the development, he can't even see half the field. I guess he just feels like he should make an appearance now and then. Territories 8, 9, 10, and 11 were plotted out as an attempt to connect the Steelers and the Broncos so they could still actually play some kind of traditional football game, but rules on top of rules on top of rules made that impossible.
I'm not understanding how...
Don't encourage him.
No. It's okay. How can I help you?
Okay, well, I don't understand how an NFL game went from that to this. This started as a standard NFL game with 15-minute quarters and everything, right?
Yes. And the general consensus is that someone flipped some kind of switch in the rulebook. At this point, the NFL was about 150 years old, and over the years, the rulebook got larger and larger and became bloated with endless addendums and conditions. Some were added to try to make the game more exciting, and others were added because a particular team or other insisted. And in a lot of cases, they kept adding rules to properly define a certain element of the game. For example, how do you know if a player has control of the ball?
I don't know, if they're holding the ball and not fumbling it, I guess.
So you sort of eyeball it, right? You don't conduct a geometric analysis of every biological vector and the location of quadrillions of atomic particles, right? You wouldn't, because having something is an artificial notion. It's a judgment call. If the NFL wanted to preserve what it was, it would have backtracked to that point. The referees should have been able to call the game as they saw it and felt it. But instead, they tried to define what can't be defined without a supercomputer. They took the catch rule and tacked all kinds of conditions and notes and everything onto it. Eventually, the catch section was 50 pages long. And you can only have so many rules until some of those rules begin to contradict each other or stack on each other in different ways. What we believe happened is that during this game, one of the teams cited a constellation of rules from across the rulebook and used them to try to argue that they owned part of the field. And of course, once that became possible, the teams raced to lay claim to as much of the field as they could.
But now there are 58 teams, not 2.
Yep. Before long, individual players found that they could also present legal arguments for splintering off into their own faction. For one reason or another, some of them did. There were 4 teams, then 7, then 25. At one point, there were as many as 100. Some of those territories consolidated, and now there are 58. Territories 8 through 11 were originally one unified territory. A bureaucratic tug-of-war splintered them into narrow lanes, which were then further carved apart by interests that had nothing to do with the football game. You can see the remnants of a baseball diamond they once tried to build. Territory 13 is now home to some storage units. Territory 11 is the 49ers' attempt at some point in the 67th century to insert themselves as a third team. It's unclear why or what benefit it could have served them. It's been lost to history. Territories 8, 9, 10 are home to some housing units. These are mostly just rented out of towners and whatnot.
So this part has nothing to do with football.
No, not really. I mean, they don't have a lot of trouble filling it up. People dig the novelty of spending the night in the middle of an NFL game, but tenants' rights do give them some authority to make a play on the ball or something.
I wonder what for. If they did get the ball, what would they do with it?
That's a good question. Probably could try to score in the Broncos or Steelers' end zones, but the officials most likely wouldn't give them the points. Hard to know, really. They could also try and score in one of the alternative end zones. See those?
I was going to ask about those.
Well, those were acquired by players who deserted from the old rosters, who insisted on playing their own game inside a game. They thought it was hopeless to try to score as the game was originally drawn up, but they still wanted to play. So they did their best to grab a little land for their
This is so buzzing dumb.
own end zones. But they couldn't acquire any territory in between them, and those territories don't like players stomping about on their fields. So the game's kind of not feasible these days, especially because they moved the Bojangles. Now, Bojangles is right in the way.
Whoa.
I know, I thought it was crazy too. Bojangles is primarily a southern chain. I never thought they would expand to Colorado. I firmly believe that on a long enough scale of time, we could see a Kroger in Oregon. Krogeron. Never mind.
I am going to crash into the next asteroid I see.
So, where's the ball?
Well, that's the big question. Thanks to a tracking system, we know that the ball is still somewhere on the field, but precise tracking was disabled thousands of years ago. There are plenty of places for it to hide, but there are about 100 permanent residents in this field. One of them should have stumbled upon it by now. I think someone has the world's best hiding place and isn't saying a damn thing. To be honest, though, most of these territories don't even care where the ball is. For the most part, they...
Wait. This is... I don't understand why people would acquire territories in this field if they don't even want to play.
If a piece of property is valuable to someone, it is valuable to everyone. A lot of these territories are held by people holding out for a deal. Could be money, could be anything else. See Territory 56? Thousands of years ago, it was a far larger and more valuable territory. It was once the only access points connecting Territory 17 and Territory 104, which no longer exists. That territory was claimed by a contingent of fans who demanded that brown mustard be provided in the concession areas. So they...
People still go to this game?
Oh, for sure they do. They don't pack it in like they used to, but 75,000 people bought a ticket for this game back in 2080 or whatever. The stadium's generous re-entry policy lets them come and go. At any given time, there's probably about 1,000 people.
Oh, come on, don't tell me that.
You didn't know that?
People sit in the stands and watch this. This busing crap, this garbage dump where nothing busing ever happens.
Oh, yeah, the Broncos fans are crazy. So anyway, the fans were like, we've got the most crucial territory on the field. Give us some busing brown mustard or else. And the stadium management came back with we're always looking to give our fans the best fan experience, but unfortunately our vendors, whatever, so they were like, bust it and made a lake out of it. That moment heavily influenced the geopolitical climate of Sports Authority Field at Mile High for centuries. Indeed, it...
Is that a statue of Sir Walter Raleigh?
Yeah.
Why?
Is there any explanation you would possibly find satisfactory?
No.
I think I'm fascinated by this game.
Yes!
No.
I really am. It's like, look at all the time it's taken to make this game what it is. People have spent forever arguing and negotiating. Wow, and look at those skyscrapers. I didn't even ask about those. The resources poured into this field are unbelievable. If they just worked together, think of the amazing game they could have made. They could have made something really cool, like some kind of wild maze or whatever. I don't know. Something that was 10,000 feet tall. But they don't want that. Or maybe they do on some level and they can't work together. It's hideous.
Holy bus, I like you. That is exactly it. That's exactly it. Ten, I think I know why you hate this and I love it.
I'll listen if you let me change the channel.
Okay, but we're definitely going to watch more of it later, okay?
Whatever.
So, you're American. You're from Florida.
Built in California, launched from Florida.
Right. So I bet you see this and you see a capitalist error, capitalism run wild.
Sure, it's too much salt in the soup. Capitalism can't be allowed to run the entire show. There has to be some sort of counterbalance. If there isn't leverage on behalf of the common good, this is what you end up with. If this game still has central governing body, 9 is right. There could be something great, but it is a garbage dump. It's a failure.
This is capitalism, you donk. This is what it's supposed to be. This is how it ends. If it isn't there, it's only because it isn't there yet. It's like you're staring at a cake in the oven and wondering if it's going to be a cake. Things went the other direction in America, and thank God for that, but capitalism deserves a zoo like this. It's a beast of the wild as any grizzly bear with fawn's blood in its mouth. I think you see deeds and contracts and bureaucratic bloat and see that something went wrong. Something was always wrong, y'all. I love it. I love to watch it in a zoo where it can't hurt me.
And people are tuning out. We're down to 106 listeners.
People are listening to us? Like, people on Earth?
Well, they were. Only 98 now. Thanks for that, Juice. Thank you.
Well, when you talk to a 15,750-year-old spacecraft who was built in Toulouse, this is WTF you get. Sorry for being bored in French.
Yes! So, Dale,
Yes.
are you familiar with this work?
No.
This is called 17776.
Okay.
It takes place in the year
17,776?
That's correct. And it is a work that is on the SB Nation website, and if you don't give a crap about the NFL, that's fine. It's a beautiful piece of fiction, of multimedia fiction that really only works on the web. And you can find links to it anywhere, and if you've got about an hour to spend where you're like, I could really go for a weird multimedia work, it's just a glorious thing to kind of sit and read. The guy who wrote it, John Boyes, he's the creative director for SB Nation. He's just kind of used to doing unusual stuff, and I'm a big fan of his because he does really good, his aesthetic is just off somehow, and it's actually really, really enjoyable. And it's just, as Mr. Flip says, it's what football will look like in the future when humans stop dying and what they will do to play football. And it's just you've already had a few things spoiled for you, but it's just a really interesting work to see how it develops. I highly recommend to anybody to go read it when we're done Desert Bus, definitely. But you might enjoy it as well.
Cool.
It's
Well,
good sci-fi.
I was reminded of